We talk LA Kings, Mount Rushmore, offseason moves, and more on this Friday fan feedback edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We would love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years, the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost and a bonus daily. That's right, there is something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, as I mentioned, it is a Kings fan feedback Friday. And so we've got emails to get to, also a few social media posts as well, reacting to things that have happened over the past week for this show or anything else going on with the LA Kings. And we will start. We've got a couple of new emailers this week. One of them is Justin in Huntington Beach. And he says, "Hey, Eddie, love the show, and I'm an everydayer. Your podcast is great on my dog walks," which is interesting timing because my dog is growling at something down here next to me as he is, I'm sure, enjoying me recording the show right now. He says, same as you, I really got in the Kings when Gretzky came to town, and I totally agree with him not being on your Mount Rushmore. Kopitar, Doughty, and Quick not only have the stats and milestones, but were instrumental in bringing 2 cups to LA. But I got to go Luc Robitaille over Marcel Dionne. Both were incredible, but Robitaille has been a part of my Kings fandom the whole time, whether as a player or executive, and is still a part of the Kings, where it seems Dionne really doesn't attend many Kings events, legend nights, or player acknowledgements. I agree, hard to leave Brown off since he's the first Kings player ever to lift the cup. Great list and great show as always. Go Kings go. And that was Justin in Huntington Beach. Well, I'm glad that at least the first emailer agrees with me that as great as Wayne Gretzky was and as huge as an impact as he had on the Kings organization and hockey in general in Southern California, I still didn't feel that it was right to have him on the Kings Mount Rushmore. He's definitely on the Edmonton Oilers Mount Rushmore. He's even on an NHL Mount Rushmore. But for the LA Kings specifically, didn't feel like he should have been on there. At least one person agrees so far. And I mentioned on my Mount Rushmore, the hardest decision for me was Robitaille or Dionne. And so going with Luc over Marcel, I don't have a problem with that. It was almost a coin flip. Our next email comes from Doug. He's in Prescott, Arizona. He says, "I'm a Southern California native and attended my first Kings game in 1973. I've been a fan since. Discovered your podcast last season and enjoyed it. I liked your Mount Rushmore podcast. I would have picked Luc over Marcel, even though Marcel was a better player. Luc is a far more important member of the organization. Luc has worked in the front office for several years, while Marcel has pretty much been MIA since he was traded to the New York Rangers. I would also disqualify him because he rooted for Montreal in the 93 Cup final because his brother was on the team. I support your choice of Doughty over Blake due to longevity, even though Blake is a better overall player and had a much better shot, much tougher defensively, and a good fighter. Also, Drew has not always come into camp in shape, which led to some poor seasons. Kopi and Quick were no-brainers. There's been a lot of chatter about your comments regarding Blake. While I agree last year wasn't great and the fans are justifiably upset, the fan ratings in The Athletic are absurd. If this organization is a D-, tell me how we've made the playoffs 3 years in a row and averaged over 100 points. It was only a couple of seasons ago that Blake was lauded around the NHL for his rebuilding of an organization that Dean Lombardi left in ruins. Ever wonder why he didn't get another GM job? Your position on signing free agents isn't based in reality. Have the Kings ever been able to sign top free agents? I can't recall many. With high taxes and the cost of living in LA, it's going to be very difficult. You're asking a potential free agent to give up at least 25 to 30% of his salary compared to some other markets, Dallas, Nashville, Florida, to name a few. I think it's time to turn the page and move on to other topics. Quick comment on the top 10 trade list. Mike Richards, top 5, no way. he had a big role in 2012, but not after that. And the Kings gave up two better players in Shen and Simmons. Plus, the Kings are still paying Bobby Bonilla of the NHL. The top 10 Kings games of all time, you left off Butch Goring, my favorite player of the era, being carried off the ice after scoring in overtime against Boston. You also said the Kings didn't win a playoff series between 1968 and the Miracle in Manchester, which I was there. What about beating the Atlanta Flames in back-to-back seasons? Does that not count? Went on way too long. Keep up the good work. Time to turn the page and look forward to next season. And again, that was Doug in Prescott, Arizona. Doug, thanks for all the feedback. It was not too long of an email. He's another listener who also picked Luke over Marcel. And by the way, both emailers are correct that Marcel Dion, for whatever reason, has not been a part of the Kings much since he left, living up in Canada. And Luke certainly has been a member of the organization throughout and still is. So I get giving him a bit of an advantage because of that. Also, Doug didn't have Gretzky on his as well. So far, so good as far as me not having him on there. He talked about the athletic poll that we discussed and the fans giving the organization a D-. And I think you have to keep taking into consideration a large part of it was the grading was confidence in the organization's front office. And I think also a large part of it was also how do you feel about them now and going forward? Not really. I mean, I'm not saying it's not fair to take into consideration what's been in the recent past. And as you pointed out correctly, the Kings have had 3 straight playoff seasons, which is not horrible. But then again, also 3 straight first-round playoff exits, haven't won a playoff series under Rob Blake in his tenure. And again, how do you feel about the team going forward? I get that confidence is not very high. So if you're talking about, the last 3 seasons and how the Kings have done on the ice, I would say D- is probably harsh. But again, it's this poll is going to take the pulse of fans who are, what have you done for me lately? And then the playoff success, which hasn't been there at all, certainly taken into consideration. But I understand exactly where you're coming from. I don't think the Kings organization is a D- organization. I think, again, it was confidence in the front office. And I do understand a lot of fans not being very high on that. Let's see. Some of the other things you mentioned, I may have made some mistakes as far as the playoff success for a few years. Maybe I missed out on some playoff series. Butch Goring being carried off the ice. That's one I need to look up. That one's in my blind spot, apparently. I don't know that Wayne Simmons, Luke Shen is a pretty good player. He's had a good career. Wayne Simmons, I loved Wayne Simmons, one of my favorite Kings, but he was not better than Mike Richards. So we'll leave that where it is. As far as the Kings not signing free agents, you are correct that they have not signed a lot of big name free agents in the history of their organization. But as far as the taxes in California, the cost of living, I mean, those are certainly realities. But just as an example, the San Jose Sharks did sign Tyler Toffoli this offseason, who I really would have preferred the Kings had gone after. And I guess we'll never know if Tyler wanted to return to LA or not. But they paid him and he accepted that. And last time I checked, San Jose was also in California. And there's cost of living there as well. So I'm not discounting your comments. Those are factors. But the Sharks have signed some free agents, like I said. So there is that. We've got Edwin in Brea. He says, I watched your Mount Rushmore of the Kings, and after pondering, I have to say I agree with your picks of Kopitar, Doughty, Quick, and Dion, and leaving out Gretzky. I know leaving out Gretzky is wild, considering his NHL history, but historians will remember Gretzky with the Oilers for his dominant performances and talent and records along the way with his cup wins. Despite making hockey popular in LA and changing the landscape of the NHL, Gretzky did not win a cup in his tenure, although he did make it to the 93 Cup final. Kopitar, Doughty, Quick all have 2 cups. As for Marcel Dion, to me, he's the GOAT of the Kings players of all time. Like Gretzky, he was traded to LA from Detroit in the summer of 75, spent all 12 seasons in LA at the Fabulous Forum, basically carried a team, even though he had some good players like the Triple Crown line. However, Dion was top 10 in scoring when he played with the Kings. When Marcel retired from the NHL in 89, I believe he was second in NHL history all time in goals with 731, as well as power plays and points. Now, much has changed with Gretzky and a few others. Showed Dion's greatness in his era, mostly in the form blue and gold. The Little Beaver, he was called, perhaps the most underrated, perhaps unnoticed Hall of Famer in NHL history, since he never made a Stanley Cup final and never won a Hart Trophy. He did win an Art Ross as the league's points leader and a playoff MVP, and not playoff MVP, players MVP. That is now called the Ted Lindsay Award. And that was Edwin in Brea checking in. So again, another person who agrees with me leaving Gretzky off of the Kings Mount Rushmore. And again, I will repeat what I said. I never saw Marcel Dion play. He's the one Kings player that if somehow I could go back in time and watch, I would love to have seen him in his prime and what he was able to do. But the numbers speak for themselves, and I had no problem with Marcel Dion on my Mount Rushmore. All right, up next, we've got some fans chiming in on the Patrick Laine rumors of him possibly being interested in the Kings. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But with FanDuel, they let the sports go and continue whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets that I'm in the mood to make. Major League Baseball, golf, soccer, NASCAR, and also the NFL season is fast approaching. And I know what you're thinking. Sports betting is not yet legal in California. However, you can still sign up at FanDuel, browse the latest betting odds of your favorite sports and teams on the Sportsbook app, and get in on the action from anywhere with their free games that feature real cash prizes. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster of bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, we continue with the emails. Up next, we have Brian in Los Alamitos, and he's chiming in on Patrick Laine. He says, when it comes to Patrick Laine, I agree. I just don't think he's worth the risk. But more importantly, I just don't trust Rob Blake. I feel like he's making the same mistakes over again. He's going after another offensive player and asking him to play a defensive system. Sometimes you can't force an offensive player to be good at defense. It's just not their game. It's like telling Trevor Lewis to score 30 goals or Jordan Spence to be the team's goon and go fight. I can't imagine ownership would allow this. As for my Mount Rushmore, the first three are easy: Kopitar, Quick, and Doughty. The fourth is much harder, but I decided to pick Dustin Brown. I know he doesn't have the numbers or the individual awards, but when I think of the two-time Stanley Cup champion LA Kings, I automatically think of these four. They're homegrown Kings. They grew up together, and they won together. Appreciate all your hard work, and go Kings, go. That was Brian in Los Alamitos. I've said Dustin Brown's one of my all-time favorite Kings. I think he should be in the discussion for all-time favorite Kings. And again, I do put a lot of stock into kind of what you talked about, being drafted by the Kings, playing his entire career with the Kings, winning 2 cups, being, top 10 in all of the, important categories. It's hard to put him over Hall of Famers though, like Luke and Marcel Dion. But I do have a lot of warm feelings for Dustin Brown, so I get where you're coming from with your selections. This from Gary in Orange. He says, number one, hard pass on Laine, even though I do like the idea of acquiring a player on an expiring contract. He's not a good fit on a team, and his salary makes it impossible to acquire him unless Columbus pays almost all of it. While not asking for much in return, I would not trade Deneau or Gavrikov. Number two, my Mount Rushmore: Gretzky, Kopitar, Doughty, and Quick. So there was one person that disagrees with me, and I said I have no problem if you want Gretzky on your Mount Rushmore. I totally get it. And he says, number three, at this point, there's no reason to trade Kaliev unless he's part of a bigger deal with his value is so low. It's better to sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal for $1 million per season and give him a fair chance to crack the top 9. Still, I have no idea what their plans are with Arthur Kaliev. It seems like the longer they hold on to him, the more that there is the possibility that he could get another crack with the LA Kings. I'd like to see it. Maybe it doesn't work out, but I'd like to see both sides give it a fair shot one more time and see if it works out. And then if after that, then we can part ways, knowing that we gave it every opportunity to succeed or fail. Scott in Simi Valley, who says, a very nice episode on the Kings Mount Rushmore. 4 GOATs. Hard to argue against the players who are so great and have a cup in each hand. So I'll agree with you. But how about an episode on the Mount Rushmore of the 4 greatest Kings with fists of stone? Before your time as a fan, the Kings would never were never without a premier enforcer, although many of them just stopped by for a year or two before being traded. You have to do a little research, and I suggest starting on YouTube with the record-setting brawl between the Flyers and Kings on March 11th, 1979. You will not believe your eyes. It's not the greatest quality video, but you got to see it. We talk about greats from the purple and gold era. Let's remember that the physicality of the game was nasty back then, and the players I've listed below sacrificed so the Dion's, Robitaille's, Carsons, and Nichols could play their games. I suggest looking at the careers of Randy Holt. See the contest above versus Philly. Dave Hutchinson, Dan Maloney, Tiger Williams, Dave Schultz, Jay Wells, and Ken Bomber Baumgartner. Among these names are the all-time NHL penalty minutes leader, Williams, and the leader in a single period and single game, Holt. I hope I have not forgotten anyone because I wouldn't want to piss off any of these guys. LOL. He says, I'm sending some pictures that you may check out, including one of my prized possessions, the Jay Wells Bobble Fist. How many players do you know have their own Bobble Fist? Enough said on the toughness of Jay Wells. That could be an idea for an episode. Who were the greatest enforcers in Kings history? Certainly it's from an era that we're never going to see in the NHL again. When I first got into the NHL, I do remember some pretty epic tilts between Bob Probert and Ty Domi. As far as the Kings back in the day, Marty McSorley certainly would do a little bit of that. I certainly remember there was one fight, not because it was a great fight, but Marty McSorley got into it with a guy from the San Jose Sharks named Jeff Odgers. And they were going at it pretty good. They were trading. All of a sudden, Marty hit him right on the button. And Odgers' expression changed from this face of, and then he just went blank. He was out. He was out before he hit the ice. So I do remember that. But Tiger Williams certainly is memorable. I didn't know about Randy Holt, though. I'll have to check out that brawl against the Flyers, which I actually didn't know about. Ken Baumgartner, Jay Wells, Dave Schultz. I certainly have heard of those names, but Tiger Williams, there was a great line, and I think it was the great LA Times columnist Jim Murray, I think, who had an amazing line about Tiger Williams. So if you don't know Tiger Williams, obviously he was a guy who got in a ton of fights. He's the all-time penalty minutes leader in NHL history, and his face was literally flattened. I assume he was kind of born that way, but all the fights he got into certainly didn't help. Kind of like think Ian LePerriere, if you remember Lappy from back in the day with the Kings, kind of a flat face. Anyway, the great line about Tiger Williams, I think it was Jim Murray, but somebody said his face is so flat he could walk up to a wall and take a bite out of it, which is literally true. His face was flat as an iron. Unbelievable. But yeah, and it was a different era. I've always said about fighting in hockey, I never liked hockey because of fighting, but I also am not going to lie and say that the occasional fight doesn't excite me, that I don't cheer and get out of my seat and clap and applaud for a good scrap every now and then. I'm okay with it not being a huge part of hockey anymore. And if it went away tomorrow, if the NHL decided we're outlawing it, it's over, it wouldn't affect my love of hockey. It wouldn't, but I also can't deny that a good fight every now and then is pretty exciting. We do have one more email to share, and we've got some social media feedback to share as well. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has got everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay is Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, we've got one more email to read for you, and then we've got some social media comments that I wanted to include. And this comes from Robert in Hawthorne. He says, I see all the work and effort and money being spent on our wonderful home, Crypto.com Arena. And I wish upper management, ownership, and hell, even Rob Blake could and would have used that money to upgrade the product on the ice. I renewed my son, Jeremiah's season tickets because I'm a diehard Kings fan, and anything that makes my son extremely happy, as the Kings do, and watching him grow up from 5 years to present 20 years, the cost and the money for the memories are worth it. My wish is that we might surprise the Kings, or excuse me, surprise the league, make the playoffs, and not meet the Oilers in the first round. A father who loves his one and only child, young man, and my love for the Kings. Keep up the good work, Eddie. Go Kings, go. And that is Robert in Hawthorne. He emailed a while back and said he was disgruntled. He was down after the loss to the Oilers and said he was considering not renewing his season tickets. And as someone whose money goes into Chargers season tickets, my wife is a diehard Chargers fan. I understand the investment and the money that people put into season tickets. It's not nothing. It is I appreciate anyone who makes that commitment. Robert, I'm glad you're going to be out there. I'm glad that you and your son can enjoy this. I certainly don't have kids, but I can understand enjoying going to those games, even though the Chargers aren't my favorite team, going to those games with my wife. And sometimes they're tough games to go to, but she loves her team just like you love the Kings. So I get going with someone and enjoying that time together and making memories and things like that. So awesome that you've decided to keep that going, and hopefully we'll see you out at Crypto.com Arena here next season. Speaking of Crypto.com Arena, I do have to say, you talked about the Kings spending money on upgrades for the arena, and you wish they had spent it on the on-ice product. Again, the Kings are spending to the salary cap, so it's not as if they aren't spending the money. Now, you may not agree with how they're spending the money, and I get that, but they are spending the money. But yes, if you didn't know, and a little bit of Kings news, the Crypto.com Arena is undergoing some major renovations. Apparently, a new scoreboard has been put in. I didn't think there was anything wrong with the old one, but okay. So that's something to look forward to for Robert and anyone else who goes out for the Kings games this year. And as we've shared, and you probably know, no preseason games in LA for the Kings this year because of the upgrades going on at Crypto. So you talk about the investment, we talk about ownership, and I know that sometimes it's easy to think that maybe they don't care because we don't see these people at the games. There's no one guy, there's no Jack Kent Cook or Bruce McNall or whoever. It's a group of people. I know that Peter Anschutz is kind of the head guy in charge, but it's an ownership group, right? So, and there's no one guy that we don't see him up in the box and cheering, and it's kind of, you get the idea that maybe they don't care. But again, they are spending to the salary cap. They are upgrading the arena, which is owned by AEG, which owns the Kings. Some people might think, the Lakers and the Clippers now have moved out, but the Lakers, that they have nothing to do with that arena. That arena is owned by the same people that own the LA Kings. So they are upgrading the arena. They are spending to the salary cap. So can't really complain too much about them not spending money and investing in the product. We do have a couple of social media posts I wanted to share. LA King Steve on X, who is a man after my own heart. I actually met him on social media before I started doing this show. I just happened to notice him post something on Twitter at the time, and I saw he was a Kings fan. He was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan like me, and he was a big Star Wars nerd like me too. And I just messaged him. I said, I feel like we need to be Twitter friends, and he agreed. And I've met him at Kings games. Really, really great guy. And appreciate his support of the show. Anyway, he did chime in with his Mount Rushmore. He says, Luc Robitaille, Marcel Dion, Drew Doughty, and Anze Kopitar. He said, Quick was hard to exclude. And I would say, yes, but I get it. I decided to leave off Luke, but that was hard for me, so I can understand. Gollum chimed in to talk about Patrick Laine. He says, why go through the Kalia problem at a much higher cap hit, Eddie? Plus, that's a lot of assets going the other way. Spending a mid to late first or multiple picks when LA isn't smart for a bubble team. He says 9, 12, and 22 are supposed to be our scorers in LA. So Gollum not in on getting Patrick Laine. David was very short and sweet, and he said a lot in few words. No more reclamation projects. I get that. I get that sentiment. And finally, we had James Harris chiming in. He said, I want current management nowhere near another trade for a highly talented, underperforming player. Being taken to the laundromat once a year is enough. Thank you. So James also saying no thanks to Patrick Laine. So we didn't have anybody really chiming in saying that Patrick Laine was a good idea. And I don't think it's happening. I think the Kings were just mentioned like half the other teams in the NHL being interested in Patrick Laine. But we thought we'd do a little deeper dive on it in an episode this week. And I appreciate you guys checking in on that as well. I want to thank everybody who took the time to send an email, to post on social media, to post on YouTube. Really appreciate it. And this show is literally not possible without your help in it. The email address, as always, if you want to chime in on a future show, lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. For you everydayers, those of you that listen to watch Locked On LA Kings every day or right now every other day, we haven't had an interview in I think a couple of weeks. A lot of people are on vacation or unplugging from hockey for a while. However, next week we do have 2 interviews to share. On Monday, Hadi Kalakesh is going to join us. You may or may not remember. He joined us a while back. He is our Locked On NHL draft expert and scout, and been trying to get him on for a while, and it's better late than never, but he is going to give us his thoughts on the LA Kings draft this year and also the prospects for the Kings up and coming. You might remember him as saying before last season that Quentin Byfield was going to have a big year, and he said in 3 years he'd be the best player on the Kings. So he's a lot of people will remember that comment. Also on Wednesday, Dieter Rule is going to join us. You should know him as the LA Kings and LA Dodgers musical director and organist, one of the best in the business. I know there was just a feature on him on the local TV news, and he's a great guy and does a wonderful job for the Kings and Dodgers. So we're going to have him on and have some fun with that on Wednesday. And of course, on Friday, another fan feedback show. Hope you guys will take the time to chime in on that one as well. Love you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, or at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.